Fantastic. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. I'll stop there. My name's Peter, and along with my colleague Alessia, it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of EVPA to this webinar today on Impact Investing Foundation endowments. We do have quite a fantastic panel with some real expertise, so I'm not planning to take up too much time at the start, but as always with these things, there's one or two bits of housekeeping, a little bit of introduction, including to the panelists, before handing over to my colleague Alessia to take us forward. So thank you for joining us. The first bit of simple housekeeping, even though we've all been on 100 of these webinars probably by now, every different platform is slightly different, but the same principles kind of rely here. We've got a lot of content we'd like to share with you. We've got a lot of expertise on the panel, but we really want to make this a discussion with attendees. So basically, we'll be looking to do a number of polls throughout and also doing Q&As, but please do feel free to use either the chat box or the questions box, which you'll find on your control panel. If you want to share thoughts, if you want to say hello, or if you want to put questions in for later on in the panel, please do use that, and it'll be great to have your input. The second piece of kind of general housekeeping and introduction I just wanted to do is obviously this session runs for 90 minutes. We're not going to cover everything in 90 minutes. This is very much the start of a conversation, or actually it's a continuation, I should say, of a conversation that's been going on at EVPA and other organisations for some time, and we intend to continue it later on in the year. Hopefully we're thinking there might be an informal gathering amongst those foundations that are interested in deep diving in Q3 of this year, and then potentially to continue the conversation at our Impact Week annual conference, which is in Brussels at the start of December. If you are an EVPA member, you'll get complimentary tickets. Please do register, come and see us. It'll be a great week of really discussion and reconnecting after the COVID period. If you're not an EVPA member, feel free to buy tickets and come along, or come talk to us. We'll be happy to talk to you about joining our network as well. So please do get in touch. And now, very quickly, just before the panel, I just wanted to make two quick comments, really. Firstly, foundations operate in quite a special, unique space. It's a space with its challenges, but it's also a space with huge privileges, including tax and influence in society. And quite rightly, there's a lot of discussions that are ongoing about those questions of power, diversity. There's also questions about whether foundations should be endowed or spend down their assets. All of these are valid discussions and conversations being held at EVPA, but also at other organisations. This session, we're not doing that. That's not discrediting any of those, but we've picked a topic for the next 20 minutes. And here what we're doing is we're taking foundations as we find them, and we're exploring really how and why more of their existing assets should and could be generating. So, very simple note, a bit like what's always said about moving foundations from being asset managers who give away their profits more into organisations that deploy all of their assets for maximum impact. So that's the kind of focus of the session today. I mentioned earlier it's a conversation that's been going on for some time. I personally remember being in meetings in sort of 2013 and listening to the work of the FB Heron Foundation, who were, I think in 2012, started on this journey to go to 100% portfolio impact. And it's a conversation that continues. So what we're really trying to focus on today is the why and the how, but also then why it hasn't happened, really. That's it. And so to help us with that, I'll just very quickly introduce the panel that you'll be hearing from later as we go through. First up, we have Sarah from the Impact Investing Institute, who will be taking us through their great work on moving endowments towards this space, including reports and practical how-to guides. And then we'll be hearing from the actual practitioners themselves. So Colin from the Friends Provident Foundation, who's actually featured in some of those Impact Investing Institute guides, and also then the view from across Europe in the form of Irina from the Bernard van Leer Foundation in the Netherlands, and Isabel from Anisvad in Madrid in Spain as well. So it'll be a packed panel. And then finally, there's just to say, you've already heard enough from me, but I'm also joined here by Alessia, who most of you may already know as our Head of Knowledge, Community and Market Development, a nice short snappy title, who's been working in this space for quite some time. And I'll hand over to her now just to try and put this into a little context for the EVPA community. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. And thank you for, the speakers for being here today to guide us through this journey. So now that you have heard how important this topic is for EVPA and of course for the speakers, I would like to ask you this question actually. How important is this topic for you? So I'll have a poll here, if the connection will support me. So first, if you can take your phone. As you know, we always try to engage the audience. So a poll slide. So if you can connect, the first question I would like to ask you is whether you are a foundation, an endowed foundation. So you have yes, no, and no, my organization is not a foundation. This question will help us a bit understand wisdom online. And of course, the second question would be then related to the importance that for you this topic of investing the endowments responsibly has. So I see people connecting to Slido, which is cool, and it's your chance to connect, because then we have a few questions more throughout the session. So it will be cool if you familiarize with Slido. So for the moment, the majority of respondents is an endowed foundation, which is cool, meaning that we were able to attract also those that should listen more and contribute more to the discussion. But it's also cool to see that there are organizations that are not foundations connected, so the second, and also a small part of foundations, endowed foundations, foundations without the endowment. So 15, which is quite cool. I will still give you a moment to connect, because then I'll pass to the second question, which is really about these. So being or not a foundation. So everyone that just answered the first question can answer the second one. And we would like to understand when in your priorities does this topic stand. So from 1, which is it's not important at all, to 5, it's really important. We would like to understand where you are. Of course, I think it was pretty clear from Peter, but voilà, for us it would be a 5 as EVPA. Now we have a majority of 4, which is still cool. The average are great. So the last people connecting are giving me hope, so it's a 5 also for them. So I still miss 2 people compared to before, but it's great like that. I think that it's a good result. And of course, the sample would be a little bit biased, because if you are connected, means that probably this topic is very important for you. I'll continue to tell you a little bit where we place all this discussion along the impact ecosystem, along what we call the spectrum of capital. So I think you might be familiar with this spectrum. It's a spectrum that EVPA put together based on many other graphs that have been produced in the space in the last decade, I would say. So as you see here, we have impact strategies going from philanthropy to then sustainable and responsible investing. At the right side of the spectrum, you have, of course, traditional investing. So there are different impact strategies moving in between along this spectrum. And of course, what we have done was to map also foundations along this spectrum of capital. So as you can see here, we have included market building activities. So basically what you see here, from philanthropy to investing for impact. And when I say investing for impact, as EVPA, we mean high engaged grant making, but also social investments. And we will see what this means for foundations. So we have all the market building activities, pretty obvious. They are positioned in this area in between philanthropy and investing for impact. And then, of course, you have all the traditional grant-making activities. That is something that foundations traditionally do. Then there is this engaged grant making, and in the definition of EVPA, when we talk about engaged grant making, we're talking about also providing non-financial support, not just giving grants, be committed for a long term, trying to have an engaged relationship with the grantees, but also having a strong focus on measuring and managing impact, which is not always the case. And then there is also this other practice that we observed through research and being a network of investors for impact, foundations and impact funds. So foundations also engage as initial investors or outcome payer in payment by results mechanism. So this is another way for foundations to move along the spectrum of capital, always using their grants from their programmatic side. But then there is something more. There is the social investment. So there is the possibility for foundations to engage, always looking at their programmatic side, but then we will also start talking about the endowments. So to invest through other financial instruments, so not just through grants, either setting up a separate vehicle, and we have examples in Europe about this, but also investing directly in an external, in a separate entity, which might be an existing funds. And then, of course, and as you see, we are moving towards the more investment side of the spectrum. And then we have mission-related investments, of course, and then there is everything that is related to ESG investment and so sustainable and responsible investing. This is to give you a little bit the idea where we position all the strategies of foundations, making these necessary disclaimer. Today we're focusing on that. So today we're focusing on mission-related investment, as you can imagine. So we're really talking about endowments and how this endowment can be invested, looking at the mission of the foundation, but also about what we call social investment. So basically, when there is already this mechanism in place that a part of the endowment is invested through a separate fund. For example, this was, I mean, all this discussion along the spectrum of capital was also the starting point of this working group that we run since 2018, 2019, together with Filea. The idea, as you see here on the slides, was to convene large foundations in Europe, innovative foundations in Europe, and understand how they move along the spectrum of capital. So, for example, Gulbenkian started to invest a portion of the endowment into an existing impact fund. So, the situation that we explained in the middle of the spectrum, which is maize, master seed maize. But, for example, when I was saying there are foundations that set up other vehicles to then do impact investing, I was thinking about Fondazione CRT that created Fondazione Sviluppo e Crescita, or Fondazione Cariplo that then created Giordano dell'Amore Fondazione Social Venture. So this to give you a little bit an idea. Of course, in this group for all these years, we discussed these challenges and also benefits of being able to be innovative and moving along the spectrum of capital. So last thing that I would like to highlight before giving the floor to Sarah, that as Peter already said, put together with our organization, with the Impact Investing Institute, a spectacular report that explains actually how to do it in practice. I would like to give you a little bit of a sense of what we are saying in terms of numbers. So here on the slide, you see the statistics of EVPA. So as EVPA, we collect data since 2010. Last survey that was published in 2021 had also a part on endowment. So we asked foundations to tell us whether they were endowed foundations, whether they were investing responsibly or with social purpose with their endowments, and also what percentages. Parentheses, we just launched another survey. We are going to collect data until August. So if you would like to participate, you can drop us an email. And then, of course, we will be happy to present results, let's say, at our Impact Week, as Peter already mentioned, EVPA members have discounts and free tickets. So as you can see here on the slide, so the sample was a sample of 65 foundations out of the 110 organizations that filled in our survey 2 years ago. And half of them declare to have an endowment. Then, moving forward, more than half of these half basically declare to invest, which is already invest responsibly with social purposes or do mission-related investment, which is already a great result because it's more than half. Of course, as Peter said at the beginning, probably we were expecting more than half, but still we are convinced that this is a path that can, this is a trend that can grow. And what is interesting, as you see, the number is not so high. Of course, if you're a foundation and you think you were not included in the sample, drop us an email. But there are these 18 foundations that were those endowed that were investing, and basically 41%, as you can see on the graph, is investing nearly the entire endowment through these strategies, so responsibly with social purposes or doing mission-related investment, which is pretty cool. So we consider these foundations really an example of what might be the scenario for foundations in the years to come. But now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Sarah, so she can tell us in practice what they have discovered through this report. So Sarah, welcome, the floor is yours, and I'll stop sharing my camera as well.
Thank you, Alessia, and good morning, everyone. And really brilliant to see those stats before we get started about EVPA members' leadership on this issue already. So just wonderful to so many foundations in the strategy already. So hi, I'm Sarah Teacher. I'm Executive Director of the Impact Investing Institute. We're a UK non-profit with a mission to accelerate the growth and improve the effectiveness of impact investing in the UK and internationally. And I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about impact investing in the endowment. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So as an organisation really committed to try and grow the field of impact investing, we focus much of our attention on the big pools of capital that have yet to allocate for impact. And charitable foundation endowments are oddly one of those groups. So despite philanthropies pioneering this approach, playing a major role in framing and catalysing the impact investing field, still it's quite a minority sport in terms of participation in the market. So on the UK side alone, there's 72 billion pounds worth of assets under management in the top 300 foundations, but very few of them are moving in this direction, and that to us is a huge opportunity. So supported by the UK government and a foundation in the UK, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, we embarked last year on a focus to encourage and enable endowed charities to unlock public benefits and mission outcomes by delivering impact investing in their endowment. So we want to raise awareness of this strategy with foundations, with networks, and also with investment advisors and managers that sit around and advise on strategies. And we've created this set of resources, which I will pop in the chat, the link to. See it. As you can see there, there's a guide called practical how-to guide on stepping into impact investing called Why Do It and How to Get Started. We also did a legal paper, which is perhaps less relevant. Sorry.
Lena, I think that might be, yeah.
A legal guide less relevant to this audience, and then these case studies of 5 organisations, one of whom is here today, of Treebeard Trust, Guy's and St Thomas's Foundation, Esme Fairbairn Foundation, Friends Provident, who you'll hear from, and Senny Arthur, a family office, on the work that they've done to journey into this space. So if you could go to the next slide, please. This is, so what are we talking about when we're talking about impact investing in the endowment? Well, very helpfully, Alessia's diagram really mapped that out. So you can see here, I have applied a UK foundation's practices to that spectrum that that Alessia laid out. So this is a foundation called Guy's and St Thomas's. in the UK. It focuses on driving more equitable health outcomes across 2 London boroughs. And until recently, it focused most of its intention on the right-hand side. It's £40 million philanthropic allocation to grants, and it's £20 million impact first social investment strategy targeting capital preservation or more. But as of 2018, it started to experiment more actively with the endowment wing of its 1 billion AUM, ultimately last year committing to shift the entire portfolio to invest in health impacts over time. So it's that middle one we're talking about today, what Alessia and in the US call mission-related investing, or sometimes people call impact-driven investing. So that's what we're talking about, delivering positive impacts and risk-adjusted market rate return in the endowment. So next slide, please. So before we get into the reasons why we think impact investing in the endowment is interesting for charitable foundation endowments, there are 4 impact investing market myths to debunk that commonly lead people to hesitate before they create an impact investing strategy. And that's typically anchored in quite an outdated view of what the impact investing market itself can deliver. So the first one may be different contingent on where you're calling from in Europe today, but certainly in the UK, endowed charities are legally permitted to make impact investments. And in fact, there was a recent legal case, Butler Sloss versus the Charity Commission, that reinforced this position. But clearly you need to sort of check the legal position within your country, but certainly in the UK, foundations can feel comfortable delivering this strategy. The second myth is around financial returns. You'll often hear that impact investing is concessionary, but the Impact Investing Institute has a growing evidence base that rebuffs this pernicious myth, and I'll put a link in the chat. So we have extensive case studies in affordable housing, emerging markets, investments that benefit place, whether that's SME investing, urban regen, etc. And the Global Impact Investing Network as well also has lots of evidence to back this up, that risk-adjusted market rate return and positive impact is possible. And within the UK context, a recent survey of £150 billion worth of pension fund assets with the stringent financial return objectives that they have to meet demonstrated that of that £150 billion universe, the average allocation to impact was 5%. So if pension funds can do it, foundations can do it. And in terms of product availability, people will say, oh, it's limited and you could only have, there's only product in private markets with all the liquidity concerns that has. But the market is changing and compounding so quickly that while it's true that impact investing is still 1% of the mainstream capital market, so the kind of global figure now from the IFC is $2.3 trillion. The UK market's £58 billion. But the product is growing exponentially and in private and public markets. So the product is out there. It's possible to get the return profile you're seeking and have a positive impact. And so there's nothing on the market basis that should hold you back from entering into this space. Next slide, please. So having dealt with the myth, you know, the big question is, how could impact investing in the endowment help foundations? So we're all incredibly busy. This strategy takes time. It feels complicated. It's new. Why would you take the opportunity cost to deliver work in the endowment rather than keep doing your important work, making grants and delivering programming? So we think there are 5 reasons why this is an area where foundations should be excited. And the first one is very simply more capital driving positive impacts and public benefit outcomes. And one foundation described this really beautifully. So they said, we think of the size differential between grant making and the assets invested in the capital markets as a planet orbiting the sun. If you're just focused on the impact of the planet and ignoring the impact of the sun, you're missing a huge opportunity. So I think that's putting it that front and center. And you can see in that guy's example, they were delivering £60 million worth of social outcomes, but now they've added, in effect, £100 million more by saying that that endowment money will also be focused on delivering health impacts. So you're just getting more money focused on the stuff that matters to you. And the second is around unlocking new strategies to help you meet your mission. And actually, to quote Colin, who you'll hear from later, his CEO, Daniela Walker-Palmer at Friends Provident, not every problem is grant-shaped. And impact investing in the endowment can help you access different aspects of the issue. So, for example, if you are committed to ocean health, there will be private sector fisheries practices that through your endowment you can influence. And there are some funds very specifically that are targeting ocean health and pushing for better outcomes in fisheries industries. So you can kind of use the endowment as another tool to drive change. The third are reputational considerations. So alongside all of these positive spurs of getting more money moving towards the world that you want and accessing new strategies, actually the expectation now is that if you're a social purpose vehicle, that should be reflected in your investment. So if you're making grants or programming for child rights, but investing in businesses exploiting kids in the supply chain, that's front page news. And not what society expects of organisations. It gives benefits to, as Peter kind of outlined at the top of the call. The fourth area is around capital markets and the role that foundations play. You know, they have an outsized influence dependent on their kind of reputational heft. Foundations have a special place in society, and if they can role model delivering market rate return and impact, hopefully other capital actors might follow. And finally, foundations have a long-term time horizon, with lots existing or seeking to exist in perpetuity, given, I know that Peter talked about spend down at the beginning, but let's say that lots are. So they're grappling with systemic risks like climate change, social inequality. So getting on the front foot through delivering positive impacts in the endowment, delivering measurement approaches often sees you kind of at the advanced guard of what eventually will be regulatory pressure, like reporting on carbon emissions in your investments. So you can kind of get on the front foot by starting to think about positive impacts in the endowment. So hopefully those are 5 good reasons for you to kind of go into this world, and I'll end on the kind of 5 steps that we see as being a kind of how you get into this space as an endowment. And the first is around obtaining internal mandate. So sessions like this are part of that process, educating yourselves, but giving everyone within your organization a common language around impact investing. Alessia's really superb diagram orienting people on what we're talking about when we're talking about impact investing, understanding the market that mission related investing speaks to, and then making sure that everyone's in agreement that this is a kind of a good step to go down. And typically people have started with an experiment, a kind of 5% or a specific capital allocation, and then built from there, which is how guys have done it, how many have done it. The second area is just establishing financial and impact requirements for the endowment. So first of all, you've got to resolve how much money you need to make in the endowment to serve your ultimate purposes, your programming needs, your grant making needs, your liquidity cash flow needs. And then having kind of resolved how much money you need, then thinking about how can you find product that meets your impact goals, and often using the sustainable development goals as the kind of bridge between what the foundation wants to do and the investment management world understands is a powerful way to do that. So that's the second bullet. The third is around updating the kind of key document that sits between the foundation and the endowment, the investment policy statement. So often, if you're starting an impact investing strategy, you might find that the actual policy document that governs how you invest your money doesn't help you. And actually, Colin's work at Friends Provident Foundation, their investment policy statement is a great example of an enabling document that has helped them deliver the impact investing strategy that he'll talk you through shortly. The fourth area is around a kind of internal integration of systems, and I'm sure we'll hear about that through the foundation case studies today. So in most foundations, there's this division between church and state. So the programming team, the impact team sit on one side, and the money managers sit on the other side. And this, but obviously the organization itself, or is it actually an integrated organization? It's one organization. So you need to start bringing impact into the investment discussions and investment into the impact discussions, and build those bridges between teams so that you can start to deliver this strategy. And that's particularly important on the investment committee or at the board level, so that there's impact at the table. And finally, and here I'll stop before we get into these brilliant case studies today, you need to appoint investment advisors and managers with expertise and impact. And this is often where the relationship between the foundation and the manager, where the impact investing strategy lives or dies. So what we see at the moment is foundations are really excited and convinced of the approach, but their advisors and managers are not well versed in the market. They don't really understand how it's changed and developed, and they curb the foundation's interest and enthusiasm for delivering the approach. There are lots of investment managers and advisors now, both pretty mainstream and also boutique managers that can help. So if you find that the constellation of financial individuals around you are not saying, I'm really excited to explore this with you, it's a new chapter for us, but we understand that the market's moving and we want to be part of that journey with you. If you're not hearing that from them, then it might be time to tender for new management and run a process so that you find professionals that can support you on your journey. But I'll stop there just to say, please get involved in this approach. I will put the resources in the chat, but really excited to hear about European experience delivering impact investing.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah, especially for the practical steps that give concrete tips for foundations to start with this journey. And I would like now to give the floor to Colin. As Sarah already said, Colin is one of the cases, so we will be super happy to hear from you. And for the audience, if you have questions for Sarah and then afterwards for Colin and all the other speakers, you can drop them into the chat, and then Peter and myself will be responsible of asking these questions. So Colin, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. So my name's Colin Baines. I'm the Investment Engagement Manager for Friends Provident Foundation. The foundation's objective is the foundation is an independent capitalised charity, and its objective is a fair and sustainable economy. My role was created 6 years ago to align and utilise the foundation's endowment in support of that mission. And the role covers investment policy, asset manager selection, asset manager engagement, shareholder engagement, and impact investing. We use these tools alongside grant giving to progress our mission, and where we can, we integrate those different tools to increase the impact that we can have. So a good example of our taking an integrated approach to our endowment is the thematic priority that we have of just transition. So I'll just as way of a case study, I'll rattle through that as an example. Just transition is about integrating the social dimension into climate change strategies to ensure the risks to workers, local communities, supply chains and consumers are mitigated, and the opportunities for a more just system are pursued. So that means things like retraining fossil fuel workers to work in the green economy, reusing old fossil fuel sites in order to create good quality green jobs in the same areas. It could also be things like consideration of fuel poverty and the costs of the transition, and the role that community energy can play, and how communities can actively participate and support the transition. So first off, shareholder engagement as a tool. Since 2018, we've been using our influence as a shareholder in energy utility companies to engage them on the trends that are transforming the energy sector. This engagement has been informed by and is in turn informed outputs from a grant-funded programme with the London School of Economics Grantham Institute. Our sector engagement input into investor recommendations and business expectations, and it's like a virtuous circle of academic development and real world practical testing, and then the end results are all the stronger for it. So we've got a stronger narrative and a stronger evidence base and stronger recommendations with which to engage companies, and the outputs from academia that were grant funding is stronger as well, because it's all been tested in the real world. As a result of our engagement with the energy utility sector, the large energy utility SSE, or Scottish and Southern Energy, published the world's first formal just transition strategy in 2020. We and the Grantham Institute fed back on drafts of the strategy and we'll work with them quite closely, and the end result was excellent. It establishes 20 principles to embed fairness into decarbonisation plans, covering all 4 key stakeholders that we were engaging for them to consider. So that's workers, communities, supply chains and consumers. And in the run-up to COP26 last year, and again as a result of our shareholder engagement, SSE was joined by EDF, Scottish Power and Centrica in also publishing comprehensive just transition strategies. So by successfully using our shareholder influence for just transition to net zero emissions, we're supporting our core mission of a fairer and more sustainable economy. So that's how we are supporting just transition via our mainstream ESG funds and mainstream investments. But what about purposeful capital allocation and impact investing? So we've done that in this area as well. In 2020, we invested in Riding Sunbeams. That was a joint venture between Community Energy South and the climate charity Possible. It's the first company to embed facilitating a just transition into its business articles, and our investment followed a grant that we provided a year earlier in order to support the development of the business. So we gave a grant to help to set it up, and then we invested at that stage when it's difficult to find capital for startups, that high risk period until revenues start to come in. So we've invested at that stage because of its impact and because of its contribution to our mission. Riding Sunbeams seeks to decarbonise the transport system by developing community-owned renewable energy assets and then using that electricity to power the railways. It has huge potential to unlock community energy, providing a commercial route to market and enabling large regional energy users like the railway networks to both decarbonise and to add value to the communities that they're operating in. So alongside decarbonisation, it supports community energy, which brings a wealth of local social and local economic benefits, not least that it creates a source of income for the community. And to date, that income is being used for a vast array of community beneficial sort of objectives. A lot of them deal with local fuel poverty, but there's also purchasing other community assets, providing youth employment training, that kind of thing, and a lot more. It can be anything, in fact. The community is empowered to meet its own needs and to address its own priorities. And Riding Sunbeams there is more of a long-term impact investment. in that we're not expecting a return on investment within the first couple of years. But we've built a portfolio of investments in direct community energy projects, which are realising annual incomes with immediate effect. These include Owl Wind Co-op in a former mining community in South Wales. It's a 2-turbine project that's expected to generate £3 million for local community benefit, and all of it is going to go to a local fuel poverty charity. We've also invested in Egni Solar Co-op, another Welsh community energy co-op. They're installing rooftop solar on public and community buildings across Wales. So they're, in terms of financial returns, they're generating 4 and 5% a year, and so far they've paid out every year since our investment. Beyond our thematic priority of just transition, we have some other direct investments, but no doubt, like many on the call today, we do have limited resource for this. Friends Provident Foundation has my role, which is still a new role in the sector. There's not too many have equivalents. So the idea of making and managing a very large impact investment portfolio is probably not feasible for many charities. So to address this common barrier and to help progress our mission, 5 years ago, we became a founding partner in Snowball Impact Management. This is a groundbreaking, diversified, multi-asset class impact fund of funds. It invests across 2 interconnected themes of social equity and environmental sustainability. And like Sarah mentioned, it also uses the SDGs as a framework for identifying investment opportunities and reporting the impact. It has a targeted risk-adjusted return of 6% per year net of fees over the long term. And it was ranked in the top 5% of all B corporations globally for the governance that has been put in place to protect and promote its impact mission, being awarded Best for the World 2021, which was very nice. A good example of the type of impact investments it makes is Snowball's recent investment in Resonance's Women in Safe Homes Fund. That provides residential and refuge accommodation to vulnerable women, such as those experiencing homelessness, survivors of domestic abuse, or prison leavers. But the funds within the Snowball Fund are a very broad range across social and environmental issues. Snowball has developed an in-house bullseye methodology in order to calculate the impact intensity for each investment, looking at both the product and the manager. And then they are weighted to get a score for the whole portfolio. That portfolio impact score is then tracked alongside our financial performance. It's disclosed quarterly, and the long-term impact trend for the fund is reported in just the same way as the long-term financial returns of the fund, because we're talking about putting risk and return on the same level as impact and treating those 3 areas with equal importance. So if something doesn't have the impact, it doesn't get in the fund. The idea is to increase the bullseye impact score over time by adding social and environmental value. And we do that by engaging the funds as well as the sort of fund selection side of things. So just to finish off and to come back to Friends Provident Foundation's whole endowment approach, our trustees have just approved a new target investment portfolio, which involves increasing our capital allocation to impact investing from its current 8% with a 10% ceiling to 30%. And this will involve increasing our investment in Snowball, but also increasing our investments fivefold into direct, high impact, mission aligned investments. That capital reallocation to hit 30% in impact investing will result in an estimated income forgone of about 0.45% of our financial returns on the whole endowments investment. We think that income forgone is, negligible. It's the equivalent of a couple of grants per year, and it's easily worth it, we view, and our trustees view, for the additional mission value that a whole endowment approach brings. And then there's the additional mission value that, increasing our direct impact investments fivefold will bring an awful lot of mission value as well. So measuring it all on impact and on progressing our mission from putting it through a whole endowment lens, that sort of negligible impact on our income is more than worth it. We wouldn't get this impact with a couple of grants per year, and that's what we're talking about in the equivalence of, in terms of monetary value. So I hope that snapshot was quite useful. We do asset manager engagement and all sorts of other things in order to put our endowment to full use and leverage it as much as we can to progress our mission. But like I said, I hope that was useful, and do look at the Impact Investment Institute's reports for guidance. They're extremely useful as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colin. Super interesting, lots of useful examples. But what today Peter and I wanted to do was to answer to those that say, yes, of course, but in the UK everything is possible. So that's why we also invited Irina and Isabel from the Netherlands and Spain, as Peter said. And now I would really like to give the floor to Irina, so she can also present us what is happening actually in continental Europe and with the Van Leer Foundation. So Irina, if you want to put your camera on, and I'll then give you the floor. I'll see. So Irina, I don't see you. Voila, great. So super cool. And let me see. So you should be also able to, yes, great. So the floor is yours, so welcome. No, Irina, we cannot hear you actually. So I'll try to unmute you myself if I can. Voila.
Now.
I think, yes, that's cool.
Yes. All right, great. All right, well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Really, really great to hear the colleagues and the questions before me. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the leadership that you guys have taken to drive some of these principles forward. They really, truly resonate with us. And Colin, thank you for your leadership and the beautiful examples of how you've already been doing this in your PO. Would really love to dive deeper, perhaps in the Q&A, into how you've done this marrying of church and state, as Sarah beautifully put it. I think that's a sort of interesting next conversation to have. How do you really get this integrated across both the financial side, but also across the programmatic side? So with that, dare I say, not sure if everyone would agree as a community. I think that we're sometimes perhaps just a little bit behind our US peers in thinking about and acting on this topic. So I feel that it's a really ripe, critical conversation to have. And as Sarah and the EVPA team mentioned, a huge opportunity to act and to increase our impact. So my name is Irina. I wear the impact investing hat at Fundier, where, dare I say, we're at the beginning of the impact investing journey, but inspired by other foundations and putting quite a bit of time and resources in figuring out whether it is possible to have the philanthropic activities and the endowment activities genuinely closer to each other and serving the same mission with integrity. And at the Bernard Fournier Foundation, our mission since the 1960s, so pretty much since our inception, has been synonymous with improving the lives of babies and toddlers and their caregivers. So the very early start in life, which is the time when much of who we are as adults is actually formed. So our sense of self-confidence, our empathy, self-control, our patience, just the way we interact with others, it all starts building then. And perhaps just a small fun fact for you is that during these first 1,000 days of life, more than 1 million neural connections are formed in our brains, which is basically more than at any other moment in our life. And it has been proven that investing in these early outcomes can bring some of the most impactful returns to society as a whole. So for every $1 spent on early childhood development, we have evidence that points to the fact that you can get a return of $7 to $10 in health, social, and economic outcomes. So our philanthropy capital, 30 to 40 million a year, goes towards this mission. But this pot of philanthropic capital ultimately comes from the management of our endowment. And our endowment is about $1 billion. So like Sarah said, the planet orbiting the sun. And as you'd imagine, in a year when our endowment performs well, we're able to distribute $30 to $40 million for the philanthropic charitable activities of the foundation. In more difficult strings of years, we can only really distribute a fraction of this amount. So as one of our colleagues likes to say, our philanthropic allocation really breathes with the size of the endowment. So why impact investing? And the answer is really very simple: to enhance our impact. And this process started for us about 2 years ago when we began to ask ourselves, like other foundations, how might we be able to, first of all, deepen and increase the social impact of the philanthropy capital, but also go beyond that and explore ways in which the endowment, so the 1 billion, not the 40 million, can also provide us with new opportunities to learn, opportunities to enhance our impact, but also enhance the alignment with our values. So how do you start? We dare to knock at the door of a couple of peer foundations, most of which are US-based, also some UK-based, that had already done this. And we learned from them, just as the EVPA team shared in the beginning, there's an entire capital spectrum, which goes from pure financial return expectations on one hand, and perhaps no mission alignment, to pure philanthropic capital and sort of full mission alignment. And in that middle space is where the magic happens. There are quite a few variations of mission-related investing, from just sort of cleaning up or enhancing the impact of the public market allocation, so stocks and bonds that we hold, to most importantly, and this is where we found ourselves as impact investors, it includes this non-concessional impact investing. So seeking to make the same types of financial returns as that asset class might make otherwise, but making sure that there is an impact story, a rigorous impact story, and a social challenge that those funds are helping to address. So with this lens, we began to ask ourselves for the first time, well, how does our endowment sit across this spectrum? We have philanthropic mission-aligned allocation, but what about the impact of the endowment as a whole? Is it having a positive or a negative impact? Does it align with our mission and our values? Do we know? Are we holding any stocks that perhaps upon further scrutiny might go sort of head-to-head with our philanthropic mission? So what did we do? We did a few things. For the public market side, which in our case is about 70% of our endowment, we applied negative screens on stocks that we thought were highly misaligned with our values. So think, for example, exclusion of weapons manufacturers, exclusion of tobacco companies, fossil fuel companies, thermal coal specifically, but also exclusions of companies that have not taken proactive steps to eliminate child labor from their supply chains in the scenarios where that is actually possible to see and to untangle. And that's a whole other conversation. But with these exclusions applied, we pretty much ended up excluding or kicking out of our portfolio 5 to 10% of the previous investable universe, which is actually quite a bit. On the private market side, which is the remainder of the sort of 30%, and this is more the sort of private equity type investments, we simply began to think, how does our mission in the early years, so serving moms and dads and babies and toddlers, how does it translate into active investment opportunities? And we also used, it was mentioned before, we also used the Sustainable Development Goals as a type of, dare I say, a filtering mechanism. And one of the things we learned quite quickly is that not all the SDGs are actually investable, but it has been a really useful framework for filtering through hundreds and hundreds of opportunities. And we ended up with clarity of thought around a couple of the SDGs that we strongly connect to, because these are areas that are shown to deeply influence the environment in which babies, toddlers, children, families grow, including, for example, decent work and economic growth, so fostering jobs for moms and dads, sustainable cities and communities, and a big topic here is social and affordable housing, good health and well-being, so for example, supporting the mental health of parents, and a few others which I'll sort of skip over for now. But jumping to where we are today, our board has allocated about 3% of our endowment, so a little bit less than Friends Provident and others. But the ambition is to slowly build the impact investing portfolio. An emphasis on slowly. So we've set some clear thresholds in terms of our expectations on the impact, the financial, and the operational dimensions. And we have approval for 2 impact investment funds so far. One of them is called New Markets Venture Partners. It's a US-based early stage venture capital firm that invests in scaling education and workforce technology companies. And we got quite excited about this one because we see meaningful ways to engage with them on the early years parenting side. They will take the lead on finding sustainable and scalable investment models, while we might come in and ask, well, how many of these businesses are serving parents with the youngest children? Do we know? How can we find out? And how can we ultimately better support this particular demographic? Another fund we invested in is actually in the UK. It's a property fund that, amongst other things, also invests in building new social and affordable housing units, which is a huge social challenge in the UK, affecting more than 8 million people. A great percentage of those, more than a third of which are kids. So again, we think that private investment capital can help leverage the capital that is slowly coming in from government in this case. And with our investor hat on, what's important to us is that many of these homes, new homes, ultimately will be going towards families with kids in regeneration areas where the families can more easily find jobs. And on a side note, we're just very excited for the collaboration, because internally we have depth of expertise in urban planning and urban design. So we're seeing meaningful ways to perhaps lend that expertise to this fund manager. So to really go beyond just writing a check. In terms of challenges, 2 lenses, one internal into our operational setup and one external, so looking out into the world. Internally, I think it's really important to acknowledge that this effort does require dedicated resources to succeed. In our case, we only invest in funds, which then hold portfolio companies rather than directly in the companies themselves. But I know other philanthropic organizations have gone down the direct route, and I think that perhaps allows a deeper level of engagement with the companies directly, possibly also a bigger impact, but also a greater level of resources. We have one role, my role at the moment, allocated to driving these activities, but I'm looking to bring in, where possible, my colleagues from throughout the foundation, which have thematic or regional expertise. And we developed quite a clear governance matrix for these activities, who's involved where and when, who decides, who provides input, and it's quite essential, I think, for healthy collaboration. But looking forward, a real challenge, and something we're unsure about, is where these MRI activities should sit to maximize their effectiveness. Should they sit on the program side, or should they sit on the finance side? Not really clear at this stage. Dare I say the jury's out. And externally, a challenge, and we filter through funds. One criteria for us is understanding the track record of the manager in returning capital. And while there are a lot of funds out there, not all of them have demonstrated that they can actually return the capital back to investors, even looking 10 or 15 years down the road. So that's a real challenge. We spend a lot of our time saying no to most of the funds we meet. And we'll have to see whether it is possible to fully invest our endowment and keep this threshold alive. So maybe the question of looking forward and opportunities. So our current 3% allocation towards this goal is really not good enough. It's just a very small amount, dare I say, pilot in the grand scheme of our endowment. But it's important to start somewhere, to really just get going and to experience the success, the hurdles along the way before we can think about scaling up that larger percent to 10%, which is, I think, where other foundations have gotten to, or even the 30%, which I heard earlier. Sarah, your point on the fact that not every problem is grant held or grant solved, that is just so beautifully put. I think it has been important for us to realize that there are quite a few options on the table when trying to affect social change at scale. And it does not always have to be philanthropic capital. There are scenarios where there are proven business models and where impact is embedded into the story, and where private capital or endowment capital is much better suited to supporting this scale-up process. So I'm here, it's early days for us, and as the EVPA team put it, we don't yet have the fairy tale ending, but I deeply believe that more of us have to ask this question of our endowments. How is our endowment invested? What's the impact of the asset as they stand? How can we unlock more impact? And for those of you on the call, the 47% that are not foundations, dare I say, keep pressing us and keep asking us these questions. With that, Alessia, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Irina. I think you said so many interesting things. I just would like to highlight probably two. You explain, why you started this journey to enhance impact, which is very simple, very basic, but this is actually everything that this story is about. And also when you're referring to the percentage that you already invested, you said, it's still small, but let's start from somewhere. So I think these are really good messages for all other foundations that are thinking about starting. And again, being a case not from UK, maybe can also start to be the conversation in continental Europe. But I will also give the floor now to Isabel, so she can present another case, an ESPAD foundation from another country, which is Spain. So Isabel, you can put your camera on and your mic, so you can present us in a nutshell your journey, and then Peter will be asking you all to comment on each other. And again, Peter is sharing lots of links in the chat, but participants, you can also share your own questions, and then we will have the time at the end to answer. So okay. Isabel, are you here? Yeah.
Yes, can you see me, hear me? All right.
Yes, I can
Hello,
see you.
And good morning to everybody. Thank you so much to EVPA and to my fellow panelists that have made brilliant presentations and gone through these topics and explaining some concepts which are pretty important for impact investments. I'm a volunteer working for an ESVAD. I chair their investment advisory committee. It's an investment advisory committee that was set up in 2016 to help the organization with moving towards socially responsible investments and impact investments. I think a quick word on who an ESVAD is. An ESVAD is an independent social development foundation set up 50 years ago. With a focus on promotion of health in certain African countries around the equatorial line, and in particular certain skin diseases that are very much unattended by traditional medicine, and that are also prevalent in areas where there's chronic poverty and chronic public sanitation and really very bad public provision. So the foundation is supported by individual donors. We do have access to some small funds, but one of our strengths has always been our accountability to promote to donors, and we have managed to retain a decent base of donors throughout the years. We basically this has, and SVAD has very strong how can I say, identity around what it is, what it is that we do for the last 50 years. And SVAD also accrued throughout the years an endowment, an amount of capital. We basically spend around anything from 8 to 10 to 11 million every year in what you might call grants, typically alongside public institutions in these countries or other institutions in the countries where we are active. And this money has been accrued through mainly significant donations throughout the years. I think in 2016, the board, the board of trustees started on a journey to do two things. One is to bring to the 21st century the approach of the actual, social activity or grants part, making it much more focused, much more modern, much more aligned with current trends, and very importantly on the endowment, to start thinking about what should we do with this endowment. This endowment had been invested mandates to different asset managers with a profile of doing prudent investments, but really far away from anything that we have today. And I think in 2016 a decision was taken that we felt as a foundation that we needed to do what my colleagues have said, that is to embrace socially responsible investments, and also to start thinking about how we can make a bigger, much more important contribution with this endowment. This was pretty new in Spain at the time, and I think we started taking some steps rather gingerly, finding our way. And one of the key things, and probably one of the factors that has allowed for the development of this part of the foundation, was the recognition from day one that the foundation needed help, because our foundation, having run for 50 years, we were very good at what we were doing, running health programs in Africa or in Latin America, as we also did. Now we are focused in Africa exclusively. But the skills within the foundation for investments as such, and certainly for ESG or impact back in 2016 also was reasonably new, were very limited. So a decision was taken to appoint an advisory committee of we were all volunteers, all pro bono, of people from different walks of life. Not a very large group. We're actually only 4 of us today in this committee, and there were only 4 when I joined back in 2016. To help the trustees and to help the foundation steer a path. First of all, help the foundation define what it is that we should be doing more exactly, and then to steer the path towards how to get there. And I think all the preparatory work started in 2016. We had, as you might expect, many meetings to discuss how we would go about this. The role of this advisory committee was to help develop policy, to submit it, to bring it to the attention of the board of trustees, and then for the board of trustees to engage in dialogue with the committee and to be making the decision. So this is how we worked. The first thing we did was to issue a principles paper, principles for investments. Not very detailed, but because it was principles, and we split principles from policy. The policy being much more down to earth and stating various investment policy type of things like asset allocation and maximums and minimums and this and that. But the principles stated what it is that we wanted to achieve with this. And that that paper we have updated a couple of times, but it remained very much as it was, with the key principles. Then, after the preparation work that took place in 2016, we said we started in 2017 to start moving towards implementing the investment, to implementing the investment policy and the new investments that we had laid out for ourselves. We did that in 2017 rather swiftly. I think we worked very hard, to get going. We didn't want this process to drag along. And I think in 2018 we reached the level of ESG investments over 80%. We were at 85%, and we started communicating much more broadly within the ecosystem of the Spanish foundation community. Now we have our fund, our endowment, which is in the region of 55 million euros, is 100% ESG, has been now for the last 3 years, and we have a very significant exposure to impact in the region of 36% of our investments. We set ourselves 3 years ago an objective of 20%. We have managed to find ideas and investments that made sense both from an impact and from a return objective of to do that. Of these 36%, 6% is in fixed income investments, 13% in private equity investments, and we have a rather large amount of 70% in microfinance. One of the decisions that we took that was that for this stage in the development of the fund, we would invest through third-party products. I think Sarah explained in her presentation that there is plenty of product, and I can certainly testify to that. More product is always welcome, and you will hear me later on saying about maybe not so much product available in Africa for the specific focus of our fund, but certainly global and diversified product is out there. And I think there is a steady supply, and as more people like ourselves sort of continue to make commitments, I continue to meet with people, communicating very clearly what it is that we expect. I think the private markets are taking up the slack and continuing to produce more product. We have found quite a few challenges along the road, to be perfectly honest, and I think it's taken us. It's been a fair amount of work, both for the foundation and for the advisory committee. But I think we look at it today. It's been 7 years of work. But I think we are, pretty proud of what it is, what it is that we have achieved, and I think we do have a very solid foundation of how we should be, moving along. One of the challenges was, of course, to how we will continue to educate the board of trustees on all these things, because one thing is align with the mission or align. The top, if you want the headline, and then you have all the technicalities of investments. So we have the board of trustees and also the larger organization, which is the people that actually do the social development part of the foundation, because it was very important that the identity of the fund sort of kind of broadened a little bit to encompass these activities that we were doing. So we've done a fair amount of trainings and so on and so forth, communication and so on. And we're now in a position where some people with certain employees within the foundation are also dedicated to this effort, and we have been very active since 2018, making communication within the ecosystem in Spain, promoting impact, both ESG and impact investment in the Spanish community, and we have a role, and we have the public recognition for that. We also decided that we would be very transparent about this, and very early on, 4 years ago, we published our first impact report. The foundation published a report on the social development work, And alongside it, we decided that we would start with a social impact report. It was humble and pretty simple to begin with, but you learn by doing. And I think this is the 4th report that we have put out. And today we have a pretty decent report, and we continue to have ideas of how we take it forward. So this has been our path. I think I share many of the recommendations from Sarah, and I think you have to find your way, maybe one step first or second or whatever it is, but I think it's important to have a plan, to give yourself time to do that, and also make sure that you have the mandate from the top. That is very important, and not to take on more than you think you can actually deliver, and be very transparent. I think by way of introduction, this is probably good enough. Alessia?
Yeah, there should be Peter. Voila.
Thank you, Isabel. That was really, really helpful. And also it's always fun when you get towards the end of presentations when people are starting to repeat some of the same messages as well. It's just reassuring that we're not kind of making this stuff up on our own. I think some of that long challenge that it takes to get there, and also to bring trustees and other management alongside, is quite a journey. I think the idea now is we're going to call all of the practitioners and experts back to the panel, and we are running a little bit out of time, so we might even try to multitask, which is always slightly dangerous. And we do have a poll question, I think, that Alessia might launch for the audience around, just try and understand from you guys who are here with us now what the challenges are hindering foundations from your point of view from engaging more clearly. Now, as I say, we are multitasking, so anything could happen, but at the same time as doing that, if you get a chance to respond to that Slido poll, I was just going to start by asking the panel, and maybe come to Sarah, since it's been a while since you shared the guide at the start of the webinar, for some just thoughts on what you're hearing, especially from those outside of the UK, and whether there's or that really came for you.
Well, I think, just as you said, Peter, I think what's really heartening is the commonality in the stories that Colin and Isabel and Irina have shared, the process in which they've embarked on it, and additionally how they're having a very kind of positive and reinforcing experience. What I haven't heard from either of them is, we got our fingers massively burnt doing this. I think having a plan, setting out on it, and realizing that you can have you can significantly grow your impact with no appreciable change on your kind of total investable capital and total grant making budget. I thought Colin said that so crisply. They're going to move 30% of their endowment towards impact through snowball and increasing, 5-fold private markets. And all in, that's going to make the difference of 2 grants. I mean, that, I think, if people can take that away, you're just mobilizing so much more of what you are towards impact through embarking on this strategy. It takes time. It is hard initially, as starting any new strategy is. As you develop the relationships, as you become more adept and confident in it, you can drive really amazing results. And I think that's what I've heard from all of the panelists today. So it's really heartening, and I encourage everyone to channel their inner Irina, Isabel and Colin and start this strategy.
Thanks for that. And I don't know, Colin, if you had any other thoughts, since Sarah's constantly telling us all we have to be more like you, if you had any other thoughts that from what you've heard from our co-panelists.
Yeah, well, it's happening, and that's fantastic. There's huge interest in this from charitable foundations, and I think your poll there is right. It's just about having the know-how to do it, and I do think it is still a bit of a challenge with perhaps some trustees and investment committees in particular that may still be of a more siloed mindset of we generate revenue income over here and you spend it over there with your grants and never the twain shall meet. That's a challenge to overcome, but it's an education job. it underlines how important and how valuable initiatives like this are, and stuff like, you know, what EVPA does and what the Impact Investing Institute does. And I think it's up to us as charitable foundations to support each other, to share our experience, to, you know, those of us that have perhaps gone down blind alleys and wasted a bit of time and resource in the past, we can actually say, you know, don't go that way. But it's incredibly heartening that there's so much interest in it, and I think the whole charitable foundation sort of sector is going to be so much stronger for it, for a full integrated approach.
Thanks for that, Colin. And I think, I mean, before coming to our other panelists, I think also just to remind panelists, we are, attendees, that we're running a little bit short on time because we're all too passionate about this subject. That's why we didn't show you an agenda at the start. It's not our first rodeo. And basically what I'm wondering is, if you do have any burning questions, do please get in touch, but also we will share all the slides and the recordings from here as well. And I'm sure if you want to get in contact with panelists, we can also, I'm sure they'll be happy to chat with you afterwards as well. So just to make that aware. But I also just wanted to come to Isabel and Irina, because obviously you both referenced the earlier presentations, but it'd just be quite interesting to hear from you guys. I mean, Colin mentioned how you can learn from other foundations and such like that. I mean, did you have much access to that as you've been on this journey, or were there particular points where you were learning from others, either in country or more widely European? I don't know, Irina, I think you mentioned in your talk about accessing some US and UK foundations as case studies. Were there other points of support?
Yeah, I mean, Peter, dare I say, I wish I had known about Sarah. I would have knocked at your door basically back then. But I literally knocked at the door of maybe 10, 15, 20 foundations, about who within the foundation is thinking about this, you know, where do they sit, and can I learn from them? So it was a bit of a person by person knocking at our individually of foundations. So I think it's really great that you guys are taking up this exercise to kind of unify a little bit the experience here and drive some principles forward. Maybe I'll just say one thing, Peter, in response to what Isabel mentioned earlier, that there is a lot of product out there. I do just want to caution us as a company that there is a lot of product, maybe too much product. More product is welcome, but there is also this concept of impact washing is real. This idea of justifying impact label tunes without the depth of scrutiny of what impact means in the way that we as philanthropists might think about it, i.e. meaningful and measurable change outcomes for a stakeholder group. So I just wanted to just leave that there, that this is real, and I think it is also our duty to caution, to scrutinize, and to really be careful where we direct our capital.
Yeah, I think we could possibly have another 90 minutes webinar on that point, but it is a very important one around impact washing. And I think also for any new, I say new, but an industry trying to bring new people to the fold, your mistakes are magnified even more. So it is unfair, but the bad mistakes or the singular impact washing incidences will have a bigger impact at this earlier stage as well. So it's a very important point. I'm just gonna, Isabel, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I was just going to come to you, and what I was going to do is trying to be very smooth as a host here, so this might also not work as well, but I was just going to mention before coming to you that I mentioned earlier we will be following this up with further conversations, and I know my colleague Alessia will put some details in the chat around our Impact Week in Brussels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thank all the panelists now, but then I'm going to come to you, Isabel, and the other panelists for just your final kind of sentence around really coming back to the title of this, around quite wide, but how, why, and why is it taking so long? And if you have any sharing thoughts for just 60 seconds as we tie this out, we might even manage to hit 1/2 the hour and let everyone go about their day on time. But so with that speedy conclusion thrown in, Isabel, I just wanted, if you had any further thoughts, especially with regards to Irina's point there on the impact washing piece, but also any final closing thoughts as well as we close out.
I take Karena's point, of course, but I think we don't need to get ourselves into a panic. I am the people who talk a lot about impact are people who are looking at this from their side and who may have an interest in this thing not taking off. I think we all have to do our work, take it very seriously, make sure that we veto and we screen our processes. But I look at the world, that's who I am. I look at things from the point of view of trust. I am, skeptical trust, if you want, but from the point of view of trust. So I think if we get into, if we start thinking that there is impact washing or greenwashing, we will never move because we become stung by fear. So I think I like to take an active approach, which is to say, it is my responsibility, our responsibility to vet every single investment and to vet it as thoroughly as we can. And that is why we do, how we do to overcome that fear of the washing, because I find that deadening. I mean, myself, I have an allergy to that. You can see that from the way I'm speaking. It becomes almost like a bad word for let's not do it now. Let's wait for this to be very clear. Let's wait for a clean standard or standard. Let everybody remind ourselves that I think double entry bookkeeping was invented by the Venetians way in 1300. We are still coming up with new accounting standards every single year. So I think we have to be realistic of what we expect from investment, from impact, what we expect from ESG, be reasonable and learn to work with what we have. There is no shortcut for not doing the work. That would be a word for me. No shortcut for work. Do it seriously, and you will do fine if you do seriously and you're true to yourself. This certainly has been our experience. To your question about getting in touch with other foundations, we have to the extent that we have been able to talk to people. And again, like Irena, I wish I had known, or the Impact Investment Institute was up and running and said as wonderful report would have been available at the time. But we got to pull up our sleeves and get on with doing it ourselves back in 2016. I found that the document incredibly helpful, Sarah. Really want to congratulate you on it. We have, I think having walked along the road, there are still some pointers in there, things that we can improve, and because we continue to think about, should we do more or can we do more? What other ways are there to continue to make sure that we broaden the impact that the foundation has today.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think since Sarah also complimented Alessia on her superb diagram earlier, I think it's nice when you're on a webinar and everyone can be very supportive and impressed with each other. I think it's good, but I also really like this idea of hard work and not letting fear get in the way of actually doing it, which I think is a really important point. So I'm going to very quick whiz around now. I think we're going to go maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. I feel like a game show host now. It's good. Maybe I don't know, Irena, if you've got a final thought, and thank you.
Sure, I'm going to steal Sarah's metaphor, which I found really powerful, about planet orbiting the sun. So our philanthropic allocations at the moment really are just the small planet. There is so much out there, and look at the entire orbit. And I think that's where the impact opportunity and impact magnifying moment lies for us as foundation. So thanks, Sarah, for allowing me to steal your metaphor.
In that case, I'll just come to Colin to give Sarah a chance to come up with a new metaphor. That's fine. That's okay.
To give you a sound bite on the why, we should consider where our power comes from as charitable foundations, and it's basically our endowments. It's our capital. That's why we have power. And why wouldn't you use all your power to further your charitable objectives if you're a charity?
Perfect. These are very good. I'm glad I don't do one. Sarah, coming to you.
Yeah, I think just 3 points. Get started. All of these people have. It can be done. If your advisors tell you it can't, I urge you to seek the community and advice and guidance from your peers, and networks like EVPA can be of real assistance here, and obviously our materials at the Impact Investing Institute. And there's more, we're going to be hopefully delivering some work around the relationship between investment advisors and foundations that enable this strategy. So lots of evidence to come about how people are making a success of this, so that you can say to your advisors and managers, other people are doing it, why can't we?
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I don't really need to say much more than that, apart from thank you all for joining us today. A big thank you to the panel. It is very much only, it's going to be a continuing conversation, but one I hope is accelerating. And personally, I just found it quite inspiring that we're hosting one of these where people are talking about having already done it rather than that they're doing it. So it's been really lovely. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day. And if you have any questions, do get in touch with either Alessia, myself, or any of the panelists. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.